discuss exactly this then. What does the Allahabad High Court verdict mean for power as well as banking sector? Krishnan ASV, lead banking and financial services analyst at SBI Caps, and Nilang Desai, partner at AZB, joins us on the show right now. Gentlemen, morning. Krishnan, if I could start the discussion for you. Help us analyze what does Allahabad High Court judgment really mean for banks, and would this really translate into a ballooning of NPAs, higher provisionings? Is this the tipping point of another round of NPMS for them?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. From an impairment recognition perspective, we don't see much incrementally that's likely to change, because we believe nearly 90% of this stress is already booked as non-performing assets by the banks in the March 2018 and June 2018 quarters. So to that extent, banks have also provided at least the bare minimum, which would be about 15 to 20% depending on how secured you are against these exposures. So from a balance sheet incremental impairment perspective, I don't see this is going to move the needle as far as NPA recognition is concerned. From a provisioning perspective, again, just referring to an NCLT does not necessarily mean admission into NCLT. As we have seen even in NCLT list 2 cases, there are cases that have been referred to NCLT in December 2017 which are not yet admitted. So to that extent, I think you have a little more time before you start seeing a price discovery happen, and until such time there will be aging related provisions. As long as that continues, I don't see an immediate lumpy provisioning requirement for banks either.
What is your sense on the kind of provisioning some of the banks have done? Because there is some degree of opaqueness, and frankly the communication which we've had from even the best of the banks, ICICI Bank or Axis Bank, in last couple of years has not been very clear. Time and again they've come out and said, okay, provisioning problem is done, then comes a watch list, then on adding to that watch list are some new stress assets which they keep on accounting for. My only fear, Nilang, is that now banks have a reason which they can use in order to hide their NPAs.
Sorry, I'm not sure I follow. How is this a reason to hide the NPAs?
No, when I say it's a reason to hide their NPAs, they can come out and said, okay, we had provided for X NPAs. After the Allahabad High Court ruling, we'll have to provide for X plus Y. My only fear is that the banks have not been very forthright in communicating, Nilang, their NPAs historically.
Right. Well, I mean, I have to say, I don't think the Allahabad High Court judgment is going to swing the attitude of the banks one way or the other. I mean, if they are prone to not fully disclosing their NPAs, then I think that may well continue. I don't think this particular judgment should have an impact on their approach or attitude.
You think that with this judgment now, becoming a reality, that lenders in some way would be forced to resolve cases even if they come at significant haircuts, and so how is that seen as beneficial to really cleaning up the system, so to speak?
Well, the idea behind this RBI circular was clearly to ensure that the stress in the system needs to be resolved and resolved now. The approach of the government and the IPPA has been that we need more time. Now, frankly, they have had a lot of time already. I mean, when the RBI first came out with its circulars in May last year, it was very clear that they were going to go after the smaller debt exposures in due course. So I think a lot of these guys have had 14 months. Or more than 14 months actually, more like 18 months. And even now, I think as the other gentleman mentioned, they have more time. They have another 2 or 3 months until the matter is actually admitted into the IBC to try and resolve it. And if it is resolved, I do think it's possible for them to come out of the IBC or indeed not go into the IBC at all. So really, I think what this judgment is saying is that you have the RBI, it's an independent institution. It has been charged by statute to direct banks to resolve their issues. this is the view of the RBI, and frankly, there shouldn't be any other means taken to stop the RBI from doing its job. And if the government thinks otherwise, then they should give directions under the relevant statute, which is the RBI Act.
Krishnan, what could be the next link to this entire story? NCLT List 1 has only met with limited success. Power companies have gone belly up, banks have provided for them. But what happens, Krishnan, to some of those assets? Is there any hope that banks will be able to recover some of these power investments in the next 12 months, Krishnan?
So it's important to slice and dice the power sector exposure a little more sensibly to understand that you can't quite have a one size fits all solution there. There are obviously power sector assets, distressed assets, which are operational with linkages in place, but still unviable because the PPA is not remunerative enough, right? So there are obviously going to be projects within that portfolio of 34 distressed power plants where with a little bit of debt right sizing, you might be able to salvage the project, and those I believe would be closer to resolution anyway, right? Now it's for bankers to actually, as you know, your other guests have also been saying, for the last 6 months since the RBI circular, banks have been making efforts on some of these projects as well. So to that extent, it's for these bankers to now take these cases on a selective basis to the regulator and say and demonstrate that they have made genuine progress towards resolution, in which case the RBI would be more than happy to give them an extension of say 15 days to 30 days to just dot the I's and cross the T's. But that would be very selective only when bankers feel extremely confident that the resolution will go through, and that may apply to maybe a handful of assets.
But this doesn't end here,
in
right?
Many other cases where some of these...
Krishnan, go ahead,
Yeah, sorry.
please. Finish your point.
No, so the point we're trying to make is there are obviously certain other power projects which could be under construction which are beyond help, in which case NCLT may not be a bad route to take for such projects because they are beyond salvage value. So to that extent, you're likely to see within the portfolio there will be maybe 7 or 8 cases that are beyond help, 7 or 8 cases which are already resolved, and the rest of them will fall in between, and you need to demonstrate that you have made progress on some of these towards the resolution plan.
Nilang, if I can get you in on this one, because it doesn't seem like this is chapter close, right? Because after yesterday's Allahabad High Court hearing, today it seems that the Supreme Court is going to finally decide and give out a verdict. What do you think can be expected? Is it going to be a similar judgment? What is the broad expectation?
Well, I have to say, I think, and this is not passing judgment on whether or not power companies need more time. I think that's an entirely separate discussion. I think what we're talking about here is the means on how to achieve more time. And I don't think the right way really is to tell the RBI, we've given you a job to do, we've given you the powers, we've given you the directions under the RBI Act to go and decide how you think you should resolve stress. And once they take that decision, to now tell the RBI, actually we don't like your decision and therefore change your decision. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. So in my mind, the right decision would be what the Allahabad High Court has taken, for the Supreme Court as well, to tell the RBI, you've done your job, we're not going to interfere with that. If the government thinks otherwise, they have means to do it. They have Section 7 of the RBI Act to give them appropriate directions. So the expectation remains, at least in our house view, is that the Supreme Court should take the same line as the Allahabad High Court and not interfere with the RBI's decision. And it's up to the government to then exercise other powers it may have to give appropriate directions.
It just seemed like the logical flow of things. But Nilang, the government can intervene under Section 7 of the RBI Act. Do you think that the government still may intervene and ask RBI to give more time and relaxation? Because yesterday, we had the power producers body, which is still lobbying for a time extension. So do you think that this could go beyond the judiciary to the regulator?
Well, I think that's the only way they get more time. I mean, the RBI made its stance very clear. They had a lot of time, and if something had to be done, it could have been done in all the time they've had. You don't come in after a 3-hour exam paper and say, sorry, you know, I didn't get my act together and I need 3 more hours. That's not how it works. So you've been told it was a 3-hour paper. You get your act together. And the RBI is very clear that it's not going to make specific exemptions for specific sectors, no matter, you know, how genuine their case may be. I mean, frankly, most companies which are heading towards NCLT will have had some problem or the other, you know, whether influenced by government policy or economic conditions. But the point the RBI is trying to make is there is too much stress, it needs to be resolved. It's not saying shut these companies down, it's just saying take your capital banks, get out, do what you're supposed to be doing, not stay stuck with these stress companies. How to achieve that objective and yet ensure that these power companies keep ticking, well, that's for the government to figure out, not for the RBI.
All right, Milan and Krishnan, thanks very much for taking out the time for speaking with us this morning, as well as making sense of the story for the benefit of our viewers. We'll see what the Supreme Court decides on the matter later today. We'll be on top of that story all day long.